The sky burned red. Massive shadows crossed the horizon, blotting out the light of the twin suns. Smoke and ash drifted over the mining colony on the edge of the galaxy. The ground shook as the red dragons arrived, their wings beating storms of wind and fire. Residents screamed and scattered, running for cover wherever they could. Buildings shook, alarms rang, and automated defense turrets whirred to life, aiming at the dragons, but even the most advanced weapons seemed small and fragile against the enormous, scaly creatures above. The dragons circled in tight formation, their eyes glowing like molten coals. Flames licked from their jaws as they roared in unison, a sound that could crack stone and shatter fear into the hearts of anyone below. Their intent was clear: dominance, fury, and destruction. The humans of the colony had no idea what they had done to anger such creatures, and survival now depended on hiding, speed, and luck. In the midst of chaos, a young engineer named Kale moved calmly. While others fled, he navigated the broken streets with a strange focus. His hands clutched something small, something delicate, yet he held it firmly. Dust and smoke swirled around him, but his eyes were fixed forward, unblinking. People glanced from their hiding spots, hearts pounding, wondering if he was foolish or brave beyond reason. Kale moved past overturned vehicles and shattered supply crates. The wind from the dragon's wings pushed him back, and sparks from their fire caught the ground around him. He ignored the fear rising in his chest. The object in his hands was fragile, a tiny life he could not abandon. Around him, automated turrets fired, missiles streaked across the sky, and people ducked for cover, but Kale's focus never wavered. The massive dragons began to descend closer to the colony, their claws tearing into the ground as they landed. Smoke and ash swirled in clouds around them, and their eyes scanned the streets with fury. Houses splintered as they approached, and every human who dared to stand in the open risked incineration. Some hid behind walls, peering out to see who would be the first to fall. Kale reached the center of the colony, a small open square where a few people had gathered, frozen in fear. He knelt carefully, placing the fragile object in his hands at chest level. The dragons paused mid-step, their massive heads tilting as if sensing something different. There was a slight hesitation in their fury. They had expected chaos, screams, and surrender. Instead, they saw a single human standing calmly, holding something precious and alive. The other humans stared in disbelief. No one moved. Some whispered, "He's crazy," while others held their breath, afraid that even breathing too loudly might trigger disaster. The dragons hovered closer, their heat radiating across the square, and Kale remained still. His face was calm, focused, not showing fear, not showing defiance. Just attention and care. A massive red dragon roared, flames licking from its jaws, and the ground trembled. The humans ducked instinctively, expecting death. But the creature's eyes never left Kale. The wind from its wings nearly knocked him over, yet he did not falter. He held the fragile life steadily, showing that he meant no harm. Slowly, the dragons began to circle him, their movements deliberate and tense, testing his courage. Kale spoke softly, almost a whisper, to the tiny creature in his hands. "It's okay. I won't let anything happen to you," he said, and his voice carried a quiet authority. Not command. Not threat. Care. The dragon's fury seemed to stall. Their glowing eyes flicked between Kale and the fragile creature. Something stirred in them, something unexpected. A pause, a question, a moment of uncertainty. Around the square, humans began to notice. The weapons they had depended on suddenly felt useless against creatures this size. Yet here was one human, holding life in the face of death, standing unafraid. It was an impossible sight, a fragile defiance that made people rethink what courage could be. Some whispered, some gasped, and some just stared, frozen. The lead dragon landed fully in front of Kale, its claws carving deep grooves into the square. Flames curled from its mouth, smoke and heat washing over him. But Kale did not flinch. He raised the fragile life higher, holding it carefully, showing the dragons clearly that it was unharmed. The red dragon sniffed, its massive head lowering as it examined the tiny creature. For the first time, its fury seemed to lessen. Kale's eyes met the dragon's, and in that moment, something shifted. The dragon's glowing eyes softened, its roaring slowed, and the other dragons above began to hesitate. The humans, watching from broken cover, could not believe what they saw. The terror that had filled the sky moments ago seemed to pause, held in balance by the courage of one small human and the fragile life he protected. The air was heavy with smoke and tension. The colony waited, breathless, as the dragons hovered in a careful, uncertain formation. Kale remained calm, his hands steady, his attention fixed entirely on the creature he held. The dragon's fury had not disappeared, but it had been tempered by something they had never expected: care, courage, and a human willing to stand in the face of fire to protect life. And in that moment the impossible began to take shape. The red dragons, feared across the galaxy, had stopped their fury. They were watching. They were listening. And they were frozen at what the human held. A small, fragile hope had appeared amid the fire. Kale held the tiny dragon hatchling carefully in his hands, its small body trembling and its weak wings fluttering like fragile paper. Its scales were pale, almost colorless, and one tiny leg was bent at an awkward angle. The fury of the massive red dragons above had slowed, their great bodies hovering with wings spread wide, fire glowing faintly in their throats. They circled slowly, their glowing eyes fixed on him, on the hatchling, and on the strange calm between them. Around him, the humans of the colony crouched behind ruined walls and overturned crates, unable to breathe, afraid to move. The adults whispered warnings, but the children stared, wide-eyed, sensing something unusual. The dragons had come to destroy, yet they were not attacking. Their massive heads tilted, sniffing the air, scanning for danger. Kale remained still, showing no fear, holding the hatchling up carefully so the dragons could see that it was unharmed. The lead dragon hovered closer, massive wings creating windstorms that whipped through the square. Smoke and embers danced around them, but Kale's focus never wavered. He spoke softly to the hatchling, his voice calm and steady, full of reassurance. "It's okay. You're safe now. I won't let anyone hurt you." The hatchling shivered but did not cry. Its tiny eyes blinked at Kale, sensing safety for the first time since it had hatched. The human's calm presence was strange to the dragons. They had expected screams, chaos, and terror. Instead, they saw someone holding one of their own with care, moving slowly and deliberately, not trying to run, not trying to fight. The other dragons began to lower themselves closer, circling in tighter formations, curious and cautious. Their scales shone like red fire in the sun, and their claws dug into the broken pavement as they hovered. The wind from their wings tossed dust and rubble around Kale, yet he did not flinch. He moved with care, adjusting the hatchling in his hands, keeping it upright and safe. A faint hiss escaped the lead dragon's throat, a sound that could have been mistaken for a warning, but Kale did not respond with fear. Instead, he knelt slightly, bringing himself closer to the ground so the hatchling's small form was clear to the dragons. He whispered softly, "See? Nothing will harm you. I promise." The human's voice carried no challenge, no anger, only kindness. The dragons paused, their massive heads swinging slowly from side to side. Something inside them stirred, a question they had never known. They had seen humans before, weak and terrified, scrambling in panic. But this one was different. He did not fear them. He did not raise weapons. He did not beg for mercy. He simply protected life. Kale gently inspected the hatchling, noticing the small cuts and bruises along its back and legs. He applied a cooling gel from his medkit, softly humming as he worked. The dragons above tilted their heads in unison, eyes narrowing and widening as they watched. The crackle of fire and tension that had filled the air now seemed to pause. Even the wind from their wings seemed gentler, cautious, as if they were testing the strange calm that had settled. One of the dragons, smaller than the rest but quick and sharp-eyed, moved closer to the hatchling. Its massive snout hovered over the tiny creature, nostrils flaring, eyes glowing with curiosity. Kale did not panic. He extended his hands slightly, showing the hatchling clearly. "I'm helping," he whispered. It was alone. It needed someone to care for it. The dragons circled again, their movements precise, deliberate. The colony's humans watched from hiding spots, hearts pounding. They could not understand why the dragons were not attacking. The sky, once filled with fire and fury, now felt heavy with uncertainty. Even the automated turrets seemed frozen, their targeting systems reading strange energy readings from the dragon's behavior. Kale continued his careful work. He checked the hatchling's breathing, cleaned a small wound, and wrapped its tiny leg in a soft bandage. Each action was deliberate, slow, and careful, giving the dragons plenty of time to observe. The hatchling chirped faintly, a tiny, weak sound, and the dragons seemed to lean in, listening. The sound was unfamiliar, but it was not threatening. Time passed, though it felt stretched and infinite to the humans watching. The dragons hovered closer, circling lower now, their eyes fixed on the tiny creature and the human who protected it. The lead dragon exhaled slowly, smoke curling from its nostrils, and Kale met its gaze. There was no fear in his eyes, only calm and focus. He spoke softly to the hatchling again, "You're safe. Nothing can hurt you while I'm here." something shifted among the dragons. The energy of rage and destruction softened. The tension in the air, once thick enough to choke the humans, became a heavy pause, a moment suspended between fury and curiosity. Their instincts to destroy were tempered by the unexpected calm of the human. They hesitated. Their wings beat more slowly, their eyes narrowed, but they did not strike. The humans whispered to each other, barely daring to breathe. "Why isn't it attacking?" one said. Another shook her head in disbelief. Kale held the hatchling steady, showing no fear, demonstrating that humans could act with care even in the face of overwhelming danger. The dragon's fury had slowed, replaced by recognition. They understood, in a way words could not express, that this human did not intend harm. He was not their enemy. He was protector, caretaker, and guardian. And the tiny hatchling, fragile and weak, was the key to this understanding. Above the colony, the red dragons hovered, wings spread wide, frozen in place. Their fury was no longer mindless destruction. Their senses focused entirely on the human and the fragile life he held. In that moment, the impossible became real. The red dragons, feared across the galaxy for their unmatched power, had stopped. They were watching. They were thinking. And they were unsure. Kale smiled faintly at the hatchling, adjusting it slightly in his hands. "See," he whispered again. "Everything's going to be all right." And for the first time since they had arrived, the dragons above paused, their fiery rage held back, frozen by the courage and care of a single human and the fragile life he protected. Kale held the tiny hatchling tightly, feeling its small heartbeat thump against his palms. The massive red dragons hovered above, their wings casting long dark shadows over the colony. Smoke and embers filled the air, and every human crouched in fear behind rubble and walls, barely daring to breathe. The dragon's fury had slowed, but it had not vanished. They were watching, circling, waiting, testing him. The lead dragon descended, landing with a ground-shaking thud in the center of the colony square. Its claws tore grooves into the cracked pavement, sparks flying where metal and stone met. Fire licked from its nostrils, smoke curling around its glowing eyes. Kale did not flinch. He did not drop the hatchling. He simply raised it higher, letting the dragon see clearly that it was unharmed. A roar erupted from the lead dragon, louder than the sound of engines or collapsing buildings. Flames shot from its jaws, scorching the air inches from Kale's face. The humans shrank back, certain this was the end, but Kale remained calm. His heart raced, but he focused on the hatchling, murmuring softly, "It's okay. I promise nothing will happen to you." The dragon lowered its massive head, its glowing eyes examining the small creature. It sniffed, leaning closer, and the heat from its breath washed over Kale. The air was thick with tension. One wrong move could mean death. One mistake, and the dragon's fury would return, consuming everything. Yet Kale held his ground, steady and unafraid. The other dragons hovered above, wings beating slowly, scanning the surroundings. They were massive, dangerous, and fully capable of obliterating the colony in seconds. But they did not attack. Something about the calmness of the human, the care he showed the hatchling, unsettled their instincts. Their leader continued to study him, silent, but every muscle in its massive body was tense. Kale extended his hands slightly, showing the hatchling clearly to the dragon. His movements were deliberate, slow, and careful, giving no hint of aggression. "See," he whispered. "I'm only helping. I won't hurt you or anyone else." The lead dragon's eyes flicked between Kale and the hatchling. It roared again, a low, rumbling sound that shook the ground, testing the human's courage. Kale did not back down. He knelt slightly, lowering his own height to appear less threatening while keeping the hatchling safe and visible. His voice remained calm, steady, and kind. The dragon circled him, massive wings stirring dust and debris. Kale kept the hatchling close, adjusting it slightly to shield it from heat and falling ash. The human's calmness was unnatural to the dragons. They had seen humans scream, hide, and attack, but never approach with care in the face of danger. The hatchling chirped softly, a fragile sound that floated in the heated air. The dragons paused, listening. The lead dragon's nostrils flared, sensing the hatchling's life and Kale's intent. Its massive head lowered further, smoke curling from its jaws as if questioning him. Kale met the dragon's gaze steadily, his own eyes showing nothing but honesty. He did not tremble. He did not hesitate. "I won't hurt it," he said, voice soft but firm. "I just want to help." Above, the other dragons circled slower now, curious and cautious. They watched the lead dragon, waiting for a signal, expecting violence but finding none. The humans around the square could not believe their eyes. Their weapons seemed useless, their shields insignificant. Yet here was one human standing alone, protecting a tiny life, and not a single dragon dared strike. The lead dragon's massive claws scraped the ground as it lowered itself even closer, testing Kale's courage. A sudden blast of heat washed over him, and the human could feel the immense power radiating from the creature. His hands tightened gently around the hatchling, holding it firm but gentle. He spoke softly as if comforting a child, "It's okay. You're safe. Nothing will harm you while I'm here." The lead dragon's eyes narrowed, then widened slightly. Its instincts urged it to attack, but something new, an unfamiliar thought, tempered its fury. The hatchling's tiny body, the human's calmness, and the lack of threat confused it. It roared again, testing Kale, challenging him, but the human's calm did not break. Kale's voice carried across the square, calm and reassuring. "I'm not your enemy. I only protect." He moved his hands carefully, adjusting the hatchling, showing it clearly, keeping it safe from ash and debris. The dragons circled closer, inspecting, sniffing, and sensing the truth in his actions. Time seemed to stretch. The dragons hovered in tense silence, their massive bodies radiating both power and uncertainty. The humans watched in disbelief, realizing that courage alone could hold back the fury of creatures long considered unstoppable. Kale had passed the test the dragons set for him. He had shown bravery, honesty, and care, even when facing overwhelming power. The lead dragon tilted its head, smoke curling from its jaws, observing Kale with deep, intelligent eyes. Slowly the tension eased, though the dragon did not fully relax. It had recognized the human's courage, his unwillingness to harm, and his care for the hatchling. The fury that had brought destruction to the colony now paused, tempered by understanding. Kale looked up at the lead dragon, meeting its gaze steadily. "I will not harm you," he whispered. "I only want to help the little one." The dragon's roar softened into a low rumble. Its wings beat slower. Its eyes, glowing faintly, held a spark of recognition. The test was over, though the humans did not yet realize it. In facing the fury without fear, Kale had shown the dragons something they had never encountered, that courage and care could stand against fire and destruction. The hatchling chirped softly in his hands, safe and unharmed. The dragons hovered above, frozen, watching, realizing that this small human had passed their test. The fury that had threatened the colony now held still, replaced by a fragile curiosity, and a question that could change everything. Could a human be trusted? Kale remained kneeling, holding the hatchling, calm and unafraid. And for the first time, the red dragons above paused, considering the possibility that courage and care, even from the smallest beings, could challenge their fury and reshape their understanding. Kale knelt in the center of the colony square, holding the tiny hatchling carefully in his hands. The red dragons hovered above, massive wings beating slowly, their eyes fixed on him and the fragile creature. The humans around the square remained frozen, unsure whether to flee or stay, their hearts pounding with a mixture of fear and awe. For minutes, the dragons circled, testing him, sensing the honesty in his actions but still uncertain. Kale placed the hatchling on a small, reinforced platform he had prepared nearby. Its legs were still weak and it wobbled as it tried to stand. He extended his hands toward it, but not to grab, only to show the dragons that it was safe, visible, and unharmed. The dragons hovered closer, massive heads tilting, observing every motion. They were creatures of instinct and fury, yet something about the human's calmness unsettled them. One of the smaller dragons dipped lower, its nostrils flaring as it sniffed the air around Kale. The lead dragon's eyes narrowed, studying the human carefully. Kale's voice was soft, almost a whisper as he spoke to the hatchling. "It's okay. You're safe now. Nothing will hurt you while I'm here." The human's tone was steady, lacking fear, lacking command, just care. The lead dragon exhaled slowly, smoke curling from its nostrils. It lowered its massive head, coming closer to inspect the hatchling. Kale did not flinch. He remained kneeling, showing no sign of fear or aggression, holding the hatchling open for the dragons to see clearly. The other dragons hovered around, circling in wide arcs, unsure whether to trust the human or attack. Suddenly, a gust of wind from the lead dragon's wings knocked a small piece of rubble toward the hatchling. Kale's hands moved instinctively, blocking it just in time. "I've got you," he murmured, his voice calm but firm. The hatchling blinked, sensing safety, and the dragons noticed the human's reflexive care. Their instincts to destroy hesitated. The lead dragon let out a low rumble, a sound that might have been a growl or a question. It shifted its massive head, smoke curling from its jaws and lowered closer. Kale kept his hands visible, showing that he held no weapons, no threat. He adjusted the hatchling gently, keeping it balanced on the platform. The human's calm movements, his patience, and his care spoke louder than any words. Around the square, the humans watched in disbelief. Their weapons, their shields, and their defenses seemed powerless against the dragons, yet this one human had captured their attention, and the dragons, without any force. Some whispered in awe. Others shook their heads, thinking he must be mad. But all eyes were on him and the dragons above. The lead dragon extended a massive claw, hovering just above the platform, testing Kale's intentions. The human did not flinch. He placed both hands on the hatchling's sides, holding it gently, clearly signaling that it was unharmed. His calmness spread, an unspoken message that reached even the massive dragon. Slowly the tension in its body eased. It had tested the human, and the human had not wavered. Kale looked up at the lead dragon, meeting its glowing eyes steadily. "I only want to help," he said. "This one is alone and hurt. I will not harm you or your kin." The dragon's massive head tilted slightly, smoke curling from its nostrils, and for the first time, it seemed to consider the human's words. Not in understanding language but in recognizing intent. The smaller dragons hovered closer, their curiosity growing. They sniffed the air, circled the square, and studied Kale's every movement. He did not panic. He spoke softly to the hatchling, adjusting it carefully, keeping it safe. The dragons sensed no threat. Their instincts to attack were challenged by the care and courage of a single human. Minutes passed, the air thick with smoke and tension. The dragon's massive wings stirred dust and debris, yet they did not strike. Kale's steady hands, gentle voice, and careful movements created a strange stillness. Slowly, the lead dragon lowered its head closer to the hatchling, smoke curling around it like a protective haze. It exhaled slowly, a rumble that was not a roar, but a soft sound of acknowledgement. The humans in hiding began to relax slightly, realizing that the fury above had paused. The dragons were not attacking. They were observing. They were learning that the human's courage and care were real, that he posed no threat. Kale continued his gentle ministrations, checking the hatchling's legs, brushing debris from its fragile scales, and keeping it balanced on the platform. The lead dragon's eyes narrowed, then softened slightly. It leaned down, allowing Kale to move closer without danger. The human spoke softly, "See? It's safe. Nothing can hurt you now." The hatchling chirped, a faint, fragile sound, and the dragons leaned closer to hear it. They circled, sniffed, and watched, beginning to trust the human in ways that instinct had never predicted. Kale's patience, calmness, and care were the key. He did not command, he did not threaten. He simply protected, proving that humans could act with courage and responsibility even in the face of overwhelming power. Slowly, the dragons began to lower their wings, their massive forms less tense. Finally, the lead dragon exhaled a soft plume of smoke and stepped back slightly, signaling a tentative trust. The other dragons followed, creating a protective space around Kale and the hatchling rather than a threatening one. The humans began to whisper, amazed as the impossible unfolded. The fury that had threatened their lives was held back by the courage and kindness of one human. Kale smiled faintly at the hatchling, adjusting it gently. "Everything's going to be all right," he murmured. The dragons above hovered silently, massive eyes glowing, slowly learning a lesson that would change their understanding. Trust could exist in unlikely hands, even those of a fragile human. And in that moment, the colony, the humans, and even the red dragons realized that courage and care could bridge worlds, even in the face of fire. Kale stood in the center of the colony square, holding the tiny hatchling carefully in his hands. The red dragons hovered around him, their massive wings beating slowly, creating gusts of wind that tossed dust and debris. Smoke from their nostrils curled into the sky, but the fire in their eyes had dimmed. They were no longer engines of destruction. They were watchers, cautious and curious, sensing something new. The humans of the colony peeked from behind walls and ruins, holding their breath, afraid to move but unable to look away. The lead dragon descended closer, lowering its head to study the hatchling. Its eyes glowed, still massive and powerful, but no longer filled with rage. Kale held the tiny creature steadily, showing that it was unharmed. He spoke softly, calmly, "It's safe. Nothing will hurt it while I'm here." The dragon sniffed, leaning closer, smoke curling from its nostrils, and for the first time, it hesitated before reacting. Other dragons circled above, their massive wings stirring the air in slow, deliberate movements. They had arrived to destroy, to teach fear, to claim dominance over humans. Instead, they had encountered something unexpected, A human who did not run, who did not fight blindly, who had acted with courage and care. Their instincts were challenged and slowly they began to understand something new. Kale placed the hatchling on the small platform he had prepared. It wobbled slightly, trying to stand, and he adjusted it gently, keeping it safe. The dragons hovered lower, observing. One of the smaller dragons extended a claw slowly, testing the human's intentions. Kale did not flinch. He showed his hands clearly, holding them open, not threatening. The lead dragon exhaled softly, smoke curling into the sky, signaling a tentative acceptance. Around the colony, humans watched in amazement. They had feared for their lives, expecting death and destruction. Yet here was one human who had changed the course of the red dragon's fury. Kale had not used weapons. He had not issued commands or made threats. He had used courage, care, and calmness, and it had worked. The dragons, the very creatures that had terrified the galaxy, were recognizing the humans' good intentions. Kale knelt beside the hatchling, brushing a tiny wing gently. "You're safe," he whispered. The hatchling chirped softly, and the dragons leaned in closer, curious, their massive heads observing. Slowly, the lead dragon lowered its wings slightly, a signal of restraint. The others followed. Their bodies, once tense with aggression, relaxed just enough to show that they were beginning to trust. The humans began to whisper among themselves, astonished. "He did it," one said. "He didn't fight. He didn't scream. He just protected it." Another shook her head, amazed. "And the dragons, they're listening." Kale's quiet courage had changed everything. He had shown that strength was not just in power or fire, but in care and bravery. The lead dragon stepped back slightly, giving space around Kale and the hatchling. It exhaled, a soft, rumbling sound, no longer a roar of anger, but almost a sigh of understanding. Kale looked up at it, meeting its glowing eyes steadily. "I only want to help," he said softly. "Nothing else." The dragon studied him, massive head tilting slowly, as if weighing the truth of his words. The smaller dragons hovered closer, their curiosity growing. They sniffed the air, scanned Kale's movements, and tested his patience with small, cautious gestures. The human remained calm, adjusting the hatchling carefully, keeping it safe from ash and debris. His courage, his willingness to protect life rather than flee or fight, created a strange stillness in the air. The dragons sensed the honesty of his actions. Minutes passed, but to the humans watching it felt like hours. The dragons were no longer threatening. They had stopped their fury, their fire held back by the simple act of courage and care. Kale continued to tend to the hatchling, speaking softly, ensuring its safety, demonstrating that humans could act with responsibility even under the gaze of overwhelming power. The lead dragon let out a soft rumble and lowered its massive head further, smoke curling gently from its nostrils. It exhaled slowly, stepping back, signaling acceptance. The smaller dragons followed, hovering protectively around the hatchling and Kale instead of aggressively. The impossible had happened. The fury of the red dragons had been tempered by trust in the hands of one human. Kale smiled faintly at the hatchling, brushing its small wings. "Everything's going to be all right," he murmured. The hatchling chirped softly as if understanding. Above, the red dragons shifted slightly, wings beating with controlled grace, watching Kale carefully. They had arrived in fury, intent on destruction, and now they were leaving with a new understanding. Not all humans were weak or fearful. Some could act with courage, wisdom, and care, even when faced with overwhelming power. The humans of the colony began to emerge from their hiding spots, still cautious, still in awe. They had seen something incredible. A single human could change the actions of beings far stronger than themselves, not with weapons or fire, but with courage, patience, and care. The lesson spread silently through the colony. True strength was measured not by power alone, but by the choices one made to protect life. Kale looked up at the lead dragon once more. Their eyes met, a silent understanding passing between them. The dragons had tested him and he had passed. They were no longer enemies but observers, cautious guardians, respecting the human who had acted with bravery and care. Slowly they lifted into the sky, circling once before heading back toward the stars, carrying their lesson with them. Kale knelt with the hatchling, watching them depart. The smoke cleared slightly and the winds calmed. He had faced the fury of the red dragons and had won not with force, but with courage and kindness. Around him, the humans whispered and stared, realizing that the galaxy was bigger than fear and destruction. Strength, they understood now, could come from the smallest acts of care and courage. The hatchling chirped again, safe in Kale's hands. He smiled, feeling the weight of what had happened. The dragons had arrived in fury and had paused at what the human held, Not weapons, not threats, but life, protection, and courage. A new understanding had begun, and the galaxy would never see humans the same way again. Kale stood slowly, holding the hatchling high. The dragons were gone, but their lesson remained. Courage, care, and trust could reshape even the fiercest hearts. And in that quiet moment, the colony, the humans, and even the dragons understood something extraordinary. True power was not in fire or claws, but in the strength to protect life when it mattered most.